Alright, so today it's going to be another open-ended lecture. It's going to be the case for most of the rest of the semester. We'll get to encryption. If we get to it, we get to it. If we don't, we'll just do the encryption stuff later. We got plenty of time to finish up this last little bit of content. It's kind of nice to have some content just waiting there, so we have something to do if we don't have anything else to talk about. What I want to do today is I did a quick look at the project checkpoints. And you know what? Let me get a solid number on here. I believe it's 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out of 30 teams have their deployment actually up on their site. 6. That's a horrible percentage. That means all the rest of the teams, 24 teams, submitted their checkpoint, said, yep, we're good. Submit this checkpoint without a deployment, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. I've done a deployment demo, but I believe I did it after a lecture. So it only shows up in the Twitch VOD. So I want to do a demo of the project deployment during the actual lecture portion, so it makes it to YouTube. So there's no excuse to miss that. Everybody knows that I covered this. Watch the video, and then you can get your deployment. Because I'm not asking a whole lot here, but it might be deceivingly complex or deceivingly simple. I don't know. Let's just do a demo and get this out of the way so everybody knows what's up. So I'm going to deploy an app. I'm actually going to deploy one of the student projects. Or I guess just a project. It doesn't have to be a student project. You don't know what this is. But I'm going to deploy one of the projects. So I go through the process of actually deploying the project like you're supposed to. So this is the project. CC312 group 2.dcsl.buffalo.edu. It doesn't work right now. I'm getting this, the server didn't respond with anything. That's because I'm not connected to the VPN yet. So if you want to view your site and you want to make sure that it's working, go to the URL. Go to the URL that I gave you in that email. I sent everybody in the class an email with the details about your server. Go to that URL to test whether your site is working or not. If you deploy the project for them, do they still have to deploy the project? They already deployed. That's why I'm using their project, because I know it's going to work. So I'm going to go to my Cisco AnyConnect. I have the link to this, all over the place in the... Let me pull it up just for completeness sake. If you go to project requirements, go to your deployment section. Let me get that on the right page. Hey, can I do a mini rant just for a second here? Why are we forced to still have electronic documents in pages? Why do we have to have these disgusting page breaks all over the place when I'm never going to print this out? Like, why do I have to worry about deployment being on a separate page like that? That's outdated. That's obsolete. I'm not printing this out, Google. I've looked through their options plenty of times. There's only one thing you can do. You can, I think you disable this. Yeah, and then that does it like this. But I believe that only changes it for me. It doesn't change it for anybody else, so that's kind of pointless. But this is what I want. I want this. I want this to be the way my documents show up. Anyway, the link for the VPN. If you haven't downloaded this by this point in your career, I would assume you have, at least for some other course. But if this is the first course where you're expected to work, to log into a server, a UB server, use the UB VPN. Instructions for your favorite operating system. Download, like I did, I'm using Windows right now. Download the thing. Download Cisco AnyConnect. When you download that, if I can get over here. When you download that, it's going to be software that looks like this. You're going to follow the instructions to connect. How to connect to the VPN. And it's going to say, type in vpn.buffalo.edu/ubvpn. I already typed that in. I'm going to connect. It's going to ask for my UBIT credentials. It's going to tell me Duo wants a piece of this. My phone's going to buzz with a Duo request. I'm going to accept it because I believe that this is a legitimate request. What screen is that on? That showed up way over here. Then I have to accept it. Bam. I'm connected to the VPN. So now anything I do in my browser is going to act as though I'm on campus. I'm on the UB network. And now when I refresh this page, I'm actually going to get the page for this team. I'm going to get their wonderful app. So once you deploy, connect to the VPN, or if you're on campus, you don't have to do any of that. If you're on campus already, you can skip all that UB VPN stuff. But go to your URL, and you should see your page. This is where I'm going to check your deployments. I go to this URL, where this number is whatever your team number is. I hit enter, and if I see your app, it's deployed. If I don't see your app, it's not deployed. So for the checkpoint 2, if your app's not deployed, there's not a lot of feedback I can give you on your app itself. Like, I'm not going to run 24 apps like I did for checkpoint 1. At this point, you're expected to have your deployment. There's no reason for you not to. I'm just not going through the trouble of running all of your apps. I might skim through your code and give you a little bit of feedback, but if you're not deployed, I mean, if you're not pulling your weight, I'm not pulling mine. So I mean, get your deployments up. I'm probably going to start going through the checkpoints this weekend. I started yesterday just setting things up and doing high-level stuff, and I'll start sending teams their individual feedback over the weekend. So if you're not deployed by then, like, get deployed, watch this lecture, watch the VOD if you have to, and get it deployed. So this is what we want. We want to go here and see your app. So what I'm going to do is go to my 00, which is the just the test one for myself and the TAs, so we can make sure that this environment's going to work. I tested this. I know it's going to work. And Wednesday after lecture, I deployed CSE 312, the website. I deployed this on our testing. So I'm going to take this down, and I want to redeploy that student site that we just saw to walk through the process. Some of these steps I'm going to kind of, I've already done them, so I'm going to skip over them a little bit. But I don't want a new tab yet. But that's what I want to do, is deploy this thing on that server. So I'm going to get a terminal. Man, that's like the third time I did this already today. I want a terminal. I'm going to put the browser. Actually, I want to reverse these. So I'm in my terminal. You've all done this part to change your passwords, but I want to SSH my username into CSE 312-00.dcsl.buffalo.edu. So I'll log in to my machine, and now I can edit my code. I can do whatever I want over here. First thing I'm going to do is take down. Well, let me back up a little bit. If you're not using the VPN, you can still SSH into your machine by SSHing into Carol's and then SSHing from Carol's into your machine, because Carol's does allow outside connections outside of the UB network. I saw there was a Piazza post, just in case this is a common misconception. I want to make it clear. You're not deploying on Carol's. You don't do anything on Carol's. The only thing you're doing on Carol's is changing your password, which you've already done. We're already past that. And if you don't feel like running the VPN for whatever reason, you can SSH into Carol's to avoid using the VPN. You still need the VPN to access your site. I mean, technically, I guess. Technically, you could do command line to test it. I would not recommend this, but well, maybe we can't. Why didn't that work? It was 02, right? I know why, because it's going to be a redirect. There's just nothing to display on a redirect. So we got to go to this URL. So you could do this just to make sure your website's live. You could curl it and make sure that something exists. I do not recommend that, because you don't really know if anything's working by testing like that. So get your VPN on if you're assuming you're off campus. Since we're all remote, I'm kind of under the assumption that most of you are off campus. But get your VPN on and then go to the browser and access your site and SSH directly into your machine. Oh, by the way, what's up, Jory? All right. So the first thing I want to do now that I'm logged into my machine is a step you wouldn't have to do, of course. Let me mute this so you don't hear all my Windows chimes. I want to take down my site. Oops. So I have it up. I'm going to do docker compose down. I didn't do sudo. And once that kills my app, I'll refresh and verify that nothing's happening. It's not in here anymore. Site's down. So once you log in, a few things here. If I look at what directory I'm in, I'm actually in my home directory when I log into the machine. When each one of your teammates logs into this machine, you're going to be in your home directory. So one of the first questions that you're going to have to answer is, well, where are we going to put our app? Where are we going to deploy this thing? If you all are trying to run it in your home directories, you have 4 different versions of your project, and you're trying to run all 4, you're going to run into some problems with that. So the first thing is to agree, okay, where are we even putting this thing? Choose one of your teammates' directories and put it there. That's fine. This mirrors the directory structure of something like Timberlake, but it's not associated with Timberlake at all. So if you change permissions here, if you make one of your directories available to the team, set up a group account, you can do whatever you want here. You have sudo on these machines. Do whatever you want to set that up. Create a new directory. Maybe you want to create, create a new user. I think you could just make a new user. I don't think that's the command to do it. Create a new directory. With sudo. For those of you not too comfortable with Linux, sudo stands for super user do. It's saying, hey, machine, I know you don't want me doing this. Hey, server, I know you don't want me doing this, but do it anyway. I'm a super user. Just do the damn thing. And then it's going to do it for you. When you use sudo, the machine's going to assume that you know what you're doing and that you have permission to do that. So I created this project. Oh my goodness. I already typed the CD. This project directory. I'll just put it in the root. I don't know. I don't know where I want to put it. I'm just going to put it right here. That way everybody on my team can access it. And they know where it's going to be. Just go to /project. That's where it's going to be. You can put it wherever you want. Just be aware that each one of you, when you log in, you're in a different directory because you're in your home directory. Sudo, not sudo. It's sudo. Wait, is it? Wait, what do I call it? Sudo? I call it sudo. Sudo, right, because it's technically super user do. So yeah, so should we say sudo instead of sudo? That's the real question we need to answer. Ethan says sudo. It sounds so weird. I'm just not used to that. It's more accurate. But is that what we're going for? Accuracy? All right, so there's a big part of this that I can't really show you because I already did it. But you have to install Docker. That's the one piece of software you need to run your app is Docker. That's the beauty of Docker. You install Docker, Docker does all the rest. You don't have to install Python. You don't have to install Node. You don't have to install NPM and worry about your Python versions. I know I'm mixing Python and JavaScript there. You just install Docker and run Docker. That's it. So if you just do a search, install Docker Ubuntu, I followed this guide. This one's fine from DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean actually has a lot of really good guides, a lot of really good documentation. This one's straight from Docker. This is the one I followed. It's the first hit. It's the official documentation. Yeah, language does evolve over time. That's the weird thing about language. Whatever we all agree is the pronunciation, that's the pronunciation. Or is it pronunciation? I don't know. So we have this tutorial. I recommend you read through this and know what it's doing. You're adding repositories and linking different repositories so you can clone the repos and get the code. But you take these commands. If you're risky and you don't want to think too much, you take these commands and you run them. Ideally, you read through this and understand what it's doing. But like this command right here, if I go into my command history, it literally is one of the first things I did. I got my sudo apt-get install apt transport HTTPS. Oops, that's not the right one. That's this one. Install apt transport HTTPS CA certificates curl GNU PG and LBS release. So this is installing a lot of software that we need just to get things off the ground. Above that is my apt update. Oh yeah, because I just said read all the stuff and then I didn't even read it as I was doing this. This is if you have Docker already installed. This is what you run to remove Docker. I'm not gonna do that live because that's just too risky. What if I blow up my installation and not able to reinstall it? I'm just not gonna take that risk during a live demo. So we don't have to uninstall. And then we run these commands. We updated apt-get, update our repositories to make sure that we have all of the latest and greatest repositories installed. And then adding their encryption key to our list of trusted keys. That's just this command. I forget what this one actually does. But at one point I knew what that did. It does something. I thought it was weird that it uses echo, but it does something. Riveting, right? Riveting content there. Update apt again. This I skipped ahead actually because I was reading this and actually understanding what it did, and I didn't think I needed these steps quite yet. I wanted to check this first. Where is it? I want to check something first, which is farther ahead in here. I forget what I was doing. I'm trying to get into the head of Past Jesse, and well, it didn't work right there. But I wanted to check something else. I think I was bouncing between the two documentations of how to install this, and I was checking back and forth between them, going through both of them to make sure I knew it. But a lot of good that did me because I already forgot everything. Or you know what? That's just the second half of this command now that I'm looking at it, because there was a new line character in there. Apt update again. Install Docker. Now that we have the repos attached to our apt-get, we have those repositories linked. Now we can actually install Docker. If you do install Docker first, it's going to say we didn't find that repo. And I believe that's it. At that point, you have Docker installed, and the rest is showing you things you can do with Docker. I ran Hello World just to make sure the install worked. And it worked. Hello from Docker. Docker's working. There's a history command. Oh, and show them all instead of one at a time. And I was messing around with Nginx after that. I was trying to add HTTPS to the projects, but there's not a great way to do it. I might add it next semester, where we're not doing it this semester. It's something I would be throwing it at you way too late in the game to just be like, hey, you also have to do encryption. And you'd be like, you never told us that before. Oops. And that's installing Docker. So that's the first thing you have to do, and honestly, that's the hardest thing you have to do, is installing Docker. And it's not that hard. You go through this script. You're expected to read documentation in this class. As far as reading documentation goes, this is pretty easy. This is fairly trivial. Even if you don't understand what you're doing, you can probably get away with cut and pasting each command. I don't recommend that, but you know what? You can probably get away with it on this one. Until you start running things, you know. If you're blindly doing it, you're going to do a lot more work than you have to because you're not going to know when to stop. You're going to be running all this this stuff, and you're going to end up accidentally uninstalling Docker and doing silly stuff, and then coming to office hours and be like, oh, I went through the whole... I pasted all the commands, and it didn't work. Well, yeah, but the last command was still uninstalled. So, at least read it to an extent. But installing Docker, that's the hardest part. Hopefully, at least some of you are following along and just installed Docker at this moment. That'd be awesome. You also had to install Docker Compose. I thought that was in the commands. Oh, no, you do have to also install Docker Compose. That's right, I just did that on Wednesday. I didn't install... This doesn't install Docker Compose. And then when I said Docker Compose, I did it during... after lecture on Wednesday. I did Docker Compose up, and it said, you don't have Docker Compose. Type this command to install Docker Compose. It was just apt-get. Here, I'll use Lana's history. I did, that was all today. I did Docker Compose up, and it said, dude, you have to install Docker Compose. And it even said, just run this command. It's already linked to your repos and everything. Your apt repo. It's in that repo is linked to apt. Just said, dude, install it with apt. I did install Docker Compose, apt install Docker Compose, and then it was installed. So you have to add this line to the end too. Install Docker Compose as well. After that, we're almost done. Oops. Oh, I couldn't paste that. Oops. Oops. After that, it's all downhill. If this wasn't... They hide the code button. Git. Clone the repo. I went to the root directory. That was a mistake because Linux doesn't want you messing around in the root directory for good reason. Project's right there. Oh. And then there's one change you have to make to your project. Do we have Pico on these machines? Yeah, we do. I shouldn't have done this in the root directory. So I gotta use sudo every time. You go in here, oh, they already have it. But make sure you're mapping port 80 to your apps port. So 80 is the default port for HTTP over the internet. So we want to make sure we're using port 80. Our local port 80. This team already has that set up. Docker Compose up. I'm going to even dash D up. Is it not like version 3.9? .3. Did I not get the latest version of Docker Compose? Throughout the version of 3.3. Oh, yeah. I should have just looked at chat, man. And that's it. Like, that's deployment. Once Docker Compose is up and running, we'll be able to refresh this page as long as everything goes right. We'll refresh this page. Database is probably still getting spun up. Oh, loud host. Django. My site is probably the one with, oops. Oh my goodness. If I can type. It's probably the one with settings, yeah. Sudo settings. Man, I confuse myself so much with having my I switch Alt and Control, so it's more like my Mac keyboard. Dealing with Linux is so frustrating. Oh, it's so fun. Linux is pretty dope. And there we go. We have the same app as the students have deployed. We've successfully deployed their app. Easy peasy. It was 30 minutes worth of live demo, and I was slowing down to explain things along the way. Easy. The only thing that makes this hard is if you run into an obscure problem. Like maybe it takes you a while to figure out what that allowed host means. You know, maybe there's other things with your libraries where it just doesn't want to play nice with a real deployment. Maybe the way you have pathing set up is hard-coded to localhost, and you got to fix that. Like, there are going to be things like that for some of you. But if you have everything set up properly already, it's Docker Compose up, -D. Make sure you have your -D so it's always running. So if you don't use -D, maybe some of you are doing this, actually. If you don't use the -D, so let's take this down. If you don't use the -D, it's going to run in your current session. Like, this is going to just keep running and showing me all the feedback, of course. This is just going to keep running in my current session. So as soon as this session ends, your app shuts down. So I can't do anything with this window, and if I close this window or this times out and disconnects with broken pipe, your app's down. Your app isn't working anymore. It's no longer live. But if you do -D, that D for detach, that runs that on its own as its own thing, and I can see that running with sudo. Oh, I should use line shortcut there. Sudo docker ps, and I can see these images running. The app itself, Redis for channels in Django, and then Postgres for their database. The three containers are all running, and they're running in the background, and I can log off of this machine. And it's still running. That's what we want. We want apps that run forever. Let's test out this app while we're here. I'm going to use a super secure password. Login already exists. Is that one of your tests? That must be one of your test logins. That would just be too much of a coincidence. going to break because the migrations aren't applied. Well, migrations should be applied. You know what? I guess the way things are set up, you'll get away with that one, won't you? But your migration should be applied in your Docker file. You should run your migrations. You shouldn't have the like Docker should do everything. Just put it in anything you need like that. Put it in your Docker file or your startup script if you need to run it at startup. Oh, because you need the database running. Yeah, have that in your startup script when the database still is just starting up. Run migrations then. Have a bash script. That's what I would do. I'd have a bash script that actually starts your app, runs the migrations, and then actually starts your app. Is how I would get around that problem. The whole point of Docker is you just do one command and your app's up. So everything you need to start up, put it in Docker. Have Docker do it. I'm not going to mess with migrations. I'm not going to mess with migrations right now. Yeah, it would be so much worse than Windows. Trying to get this deployed in Windows, on a Windows server, I don't know. Or maybe I'm just saying that because I'm used to Linux. And the thing that really gets me, kind of grinds my gears a bit, only one person on your team has to do this. If one person on your team understands this and can follow this procedure, you good. You're good to go. It's not like everybody, which I would like. I don't know if how feasible that is, but I would like everybody in the class to know how to deploy an app. Like you should be able to. But for your team project to not be deployed, that means nobody on your team went through this, and that's kind of, I don't know. Are there common issues that y'all are running into? Is there something I can help you out with while we're in here, while we're talking about it? Because I think that's pretty straightforward, but I don't know what issues you're running into. Or have you just literally not tried yet? If that's the case, then freaking get on it. In the real world, would this be the DevOps team? Well, one, how do you know you're not on the DevOps team? And two, if you're in a smaller organization, the dev team might be the same as the DevOps team. If you want to work for a startup, you're the dev and the DevOps team, and probably the marketing team as well. Like you're going to play a lot of different roles. And really, you should understand, even if you're not on the DevOps team, you should understand what they're going through. So you don't give them garbage. They're going to hate you if you have no understanding of what they do and keep giving them garbage. If you're like, hey, DevOps team, just so you know, you got to run migrations on that because I didn't bother. You know, you're not going to make many friends in the DevOps team. They're going to hate every time you push a change that needs to go to prod. That alone, maybe not the biggest deal, but if you're making a habit of that, like, DevOps will do it. I'm not fixing that. I'm not writing a startup script. DevOps will do it. You know. And what Memtronics, what is database migrations? In Django, you have to run the migrations to set up all your tables. It sets up all their Postgres tables to match all the data formats all the schemas that they need for their database. Which is weird that, now that I think about it, why doesn't Django just do that? Like, I get when you make a change to the schema, you have to run a migration. But why do you have to run a migration initially? Or does your repo have some database? You didn't check in some... No, that doesn't make sense, does it? Yeah, that Carol's... And from day one, I did have that as TBD. Did I say? I might not have said anything. You know, I didn't say anything because I wasn't 100% sure that we would get these servers. Ken really does a huge favor there, getting these set up. Tab 9. This would be the one at the start of lecture, or start of semester. Deployment details TBD. And March 23rd is when I started talking about it. And it would be, I mean, I do encourage you to do your own deployment as well. I'll do a demo of that in these last few weeks. I'll do a demo of deploying on a DigitalOcean server, getting a domain name, installing a cert, getting HTTPS, going through the whole thing to get your own domain name and your app deployed on your own domain name. The only downside to that is it costs a little bit of money. $5 a month to use DigitalOcean, and then $12 a year for your domain name. So not a ton of money, but enough money that I'm not going to require it for the whole class. Yeah, because if Django took care of it, it'd be too easy. Yeah. Any other questions while we're in here? Is everybody good with deployment? Am I going to see 30 out of 30 deployed this weekend? Still cheaper than Top Hat, yeah. I mean, I'll never do Top Hat, though. Top Hat's even further out of the question for me. Wait, is that due this weekend? I mean, there's not really a due date, but if this weekend is when I'm going to start looking at the checkpoints, the checkpoint 2. So if you have your app running, you can get better feedback from me. If I can't use your app, like I'm not going to run Docker Compose locally on 30 projects. So if I can go to your URL, especially after we've had these servers available for a while now, and I've talked about this and gave this demo. So if your deployment is live and I can actually test out your app, I can give you better feedback. If your app's not deployed, I'm not going to give you much feedback on the app itself. I'll just give you feedback on the reports. And if you have any slackers in your group, I'll yell at them a little. So it's not really due until the last day of class, which, by the way, I want to make this clear too, because I called it a checkpoint. The project is due at the last day of class, on the last day of class. There's no submission for that one. Just after that point, that's when I'm going to start grading projects and getting your final grades out to you. I called this a checkpoint before, which might have been a little misleading. That's actually when I'm doing the grading for all the projects, is after the last day of class. So that's when it's technically due. But I wouldn't wait until then. That's just adding extra stress in your life if you wait till the last second to deploy. Yeah, homework 5. I haven't really gotten hardly any homework 5 questions. I assume y'all agree with me that homework 5 is a huge step down in difficulty from 3 and 4. Intentionally so. I like having the last homework of my classes being a step down in difficulty from the previous ones. I don't like a non-decreasing difficulty curve. I like having a curve that starts off pretty easy-ish, really hits you hard in like the 50% to 75% way through the course, and then tapers off in the last 25% of the course. That's a difficulty curve I like. Those of you waiting until the last minute to do the project, you're going to see, a different difficulty curve. But that's not by design. That's just if you wait till the last minute to do it. Came for the title, stayed for the content. Nice. Do we want to talk about encryption? I don't think we're going to talk about encryption today. We'll save that for next week. 5, you could sit down and finish in a few hours. 3 and 4 took 3 days. Yeah, it's about right. I didn't mean for it to be that much of a... 5 could be more difficult than it is. I think I nerfed it way too much. I think I'll add to homework 5 next time. Took a lot of restructuring for me, at least. Yeah, I can see that. I wanna structure the homeworks a little bit different next time. From homework 1, I want to give you the entire front end of an app that uses all of the tech from all 5 homeworks, and then you're adding to your server as you go. As I had this vision that we're building one site, one app throughout all 5 homeworks, but a lot of you are deleting your old code and then starting somewhat fresh for each homework, kind of losing that vision. And I didn't really communicate that vision very well either. But I imagine this as a somewhat of a 4chan clone with a global chat sidebar. That's what this was supposed to be, and I don't think that came across at all in what I provided for the homeworks. Where you're doing images with captions. It's the 4chan thing, and then kind of like a Twitch chat on the side where you have global chat using WebSockets. And then auth, I guess that doesn't fit 4chan, but